Unfortunately, these people will always find house Negroes who will always find ways to manipulate and control, and will do everything in their power to ensure that their desires are met. And that is what we are experiencing as well. I know you are following it. Unfortunately, some Burkinabés have once again withdrawn to neighboring ivories and are pulling strings with the imperialists to try to destabilize our country again.
The Global Economic Forum's virtual summit had barely begun when tension snapped across the digital stage. In Washington, Hillary Clinton sat poised in the ornate Benjamin Franklin room, her notes prepared, flags behind her, the weight of decades of diplomacy visible in every gesture. In Ouagadougou, 5,000 miles away, President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso sat in a modest office with handwritten notes, solar project briefs, and agricultural reform reports stacked on his desk. The flag of Burkina Faso stood behind him, bright against the plain white wall. The moderator introduced the segment, Africa's Role in Global Climate Initiatives. Clinton's expression tightened as Traoré appeared on her screen. She had long criticized his rejection of Western mining contracts and the removal of French troops, moves she viewed as dangerous. As he began calmly describing Burkina Faso's solar efforts and food security breakthroughs, Clinton's frustration became palpable. Then came her voice, sharp, unmistakably authoritative. Mr. Traoré, let's be realistic about institutional capacity and international experience. The panel froze. Some leaders understand the intricacies of global finance and diplomacy. Others, she let the implication hang. Moments later, she delivered the line that exploded across social media. You don't belong on this stage, Mr. Traoré. The silence that followed was felt on every continent. Hashtags trended in 12 languages within minutes. In Lagos and Accra, students watched the clip with disbelief. In Addis Ababa, the African Union buzzed with emergency call. Radio hosts across the continent interrupted their programming. She thinks we still need permission to speak, one man said bitterly. Clinton's team scrambled for damage control. Her spokesperson claimed she was simply emphasizing the need for experience, but the damage was done. In Burkina Faso, people gathered in markets and around radio. The insult felt personal. Still, for 6 hours, Traoré said nothing. His silence filled news cycles. Alone in his study, surrounded by books on African revolutionaries and pages of crossed-out drafts, Traoré wrote and rewrote his response. His wife placed a hand on his shoulder. The ancestors are watching, she whispered. He nodded, knowing this was bigger than him. This was about dignity, long denied. Across the diaspora, the mobilization was swift. Young Africans in London, Toronto, Paris, and New York began learning who Ibrahim Traoré was. His speeches were shared, his policies examined. In a matter of hours, he had become more than a president. He had become a symbol. When he finally appeared on national television, it was not from a grand podium, but a plain desk with the Burkinabé flag behind him. Madam Clinton, he began, perhaps you're right. I don't belong on a stage where Africa is expected to remain silent while others decide our future. See, calmly, deliberately, he described the contradictions of international relations, how Africa's wealth is exported while its people suffer, how Western leaders lecture while avoiding responsibility for the crises they helped create. He never raised his voice, but his words cut deep. The speech was translated into dozens of languages and shared millions of times. In Washington, Clinton's team watched helplessly as the world applauded a response they hadn't expected. It wasn't defensive, it was decisive. As Traoré's words rippled through social media, African leaders began sharing the letter. Ghana's president tweeted support. Kenya's foreign minister called it a historic moment. Leaders once skeptical of Traoré's style now found themselves aligned with his message of respect and equality. Students gathered on campuses across the continent to read and discuss the speech. Philosophy professors added it to their curriculum. In Dakar, one intellectual called it the most important African political statement in a generation. Artists painted murals, musicians wrote songs, and designers turned quotes into fabric. In Paris, New York, and Johannesburg, African youth held up their phones and said, "He spoke for us." Western governments took quiet notice. Diplomats admitted, off the record, that Traoré's speech struck a nerve that had long been protected by protocol and condescension. In the U.S., even Clinton's own political allies began to distance themselves. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "Respect for global leadership means respecting all global leaders." Bernie Sanders praised Traoré's call for humility and partnership. Cornel West called him prophetic. Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote an essay comparing Clinton's tone to centuries